What specifically has Mamdani said that you think is anti-Semitic?
Pro-Hamas. Hamas is a dangerous terrorist organization that should be destroyed. To lift them up and praise them, I think that's a clear indicator that something is wrong with that. But he has to
when did he praise Hamas? I don't recall him ever praising Hamas.
Well, that's because he never did praise Hamas, and current New York City Mayor Eric Adams smeared him, lied about him, defamed him, and it's pretty much in line with what Mamdani has experienced from other Democrats, members of his own party. Now, the New York City mayoral candidate, Mamdani, is really making waves because of the fact that he is a self-described democratic socialist. He's also Muslim, and if he does win in the general election, he would be the first Muslim mayor of New York City. And so a bunch of gross people, including Democrats, can't help themselves by sharing just how gross and anti-Semitic they happen to be. I'm sorry, Islamophobic they happen to be. So with that in mind, why don't we go to House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, who just can't get himself to endorse Mamdani, and he's gonna explain why. Take a look.
Globalizing the Intifada, by way of example, is not an acceptable phrase, and he's gonna have to clarify his position on that as he moves forward. With respect to the Jewish communities that I represent, I think our nominee is going to have to convince folks that he is prepared to aggressively address the rise in anti-Semitism in the city of New York, which has been an unacceptable development. And any mayor, whether you're a Democratic mayor, a Republican mayor, an independent mayor, has got to commit to the safety and well-being of all of the people of the city of New York.
Now, this whole Globalize Intifada debacle isn't because Zohran Mamdani is going around saying globalize Intifada. That is a myth. This all stemmed from an interview he did this month, in fact, on The Bulwark. These are a bunch of Never Trump Republicans who clearly are not fans of his. And he was asked about the phrase globalize the Intifada. He described it as a symbolic call for Palestinian human rights, not for violence or anti-Semitism. So in other words, even though he didn't say it, The Bulwark was trying to get him to condemn that phrase, and he didn't condemn it, he explained what it was, and that's what's led to this whole debacle. By the way, the definition of the term Intifada, which was published by Dropsite News, is as follows. Arabic for uprising or shaking off has historically referred to a wide spectrum of resistance. The first Intifada between 1987 to 1993 was driven by mass boycotts, general strikes, student protests, and civil disobedience. It was largely nonviolent in its early stages. Many supporters of the slogan say globalize the Intifada draws from that legacy, a call for international solidarity through protest, divestment, and organized resistance to apartheid, occupation, and genocide, not violence. But there is ongoing opposition to that perspective. As The Hill reports, many pro-Israel activists and many Jewish people view the phrase as calling for violence against Jews, referencing the first and second intifadas that took place in the 1980s and 90s and 2000s, during which Palestinians in both Palestinian territories and Israel engaged in uprising in which significant violence occurred and many on both sides were killed. So, look, there have been cases of violence, including, cafe bombings and things like that. I don't want to minimize that, but at the same time, the lies about how Zohran Mamdani is going around saying globalize Intifada is driving me crazy because that's not what he's saying.
Yeah, he never said it. So a couple of things. So first, The Bulwark is anti-Trump neocons.
Yes.
And a lot of people have bought into, oh, well, as long as they're anti-Trump. No, neocons want endless wars in the Middle East. They wanted a further war in Iran. Please care about policy. Like, it's so easy to trick people these days, just being pro or anti-Trump, right? Oh, I am anti-Trump. That is why we should do tax cuts for the rich. Wait, what? I am anti-Trump. That's why we should go to war in Iran on behalf of Israel. Wait, what? No, care about policy, right? So now, when you get to this is 100% propaganda, because they're saying, I'm not just gonna criticize him for something he said, I'm gonna criticize him for something he didn't say. And do you think people get that? No. Right now, if you ask the average American that listened to any of this coverage, they would all think that he actually said Globalize the Intifada, because they're all asking him about it as if he said it, right? And so this is the same trick that mainstream media did with Iraq and 9/11. They would keep using Iraq and 9/11 in the same sentence, and then they would later say, well, I didn't say they did 9/11. I said they came from the same general vicinity as the people who did 9/11.
Right.
It was meant to trick you into thinking Iraq did 9/11. This is meant to trick you into thinking that Mamdani is a terrorist supporter, right? And so they say Intifada can only mean violence. Well, actually, the people who use it sometimes mean that, and a lot of times they don't mean that. They mean an uprising politically, diplomatically, etc. But whenever they say a political uprising, you yell at them and call them terrorists. So there's no winning. There's no winning. You can't oppose Israel in any way, shape, or form. And even if you do, and you've used all the right words, they're gonna blame you for words you didn't use, because they're the bottom of the barrel. And everyone who's engaging in this is doing it to try to smear Mamdani on behalf of Israel.
Yep.
It has nothing to do with humanitarian or anti-Semitism or bigotry. Well, if they were worried about that, then how come they never asked about the words Greater Israel, Eretz Israel, Judea and Samaria? These are all words that people use when they're saying Israel should wipe out Muslims and take their land. Those words are 10,000 times worse, because they're doing it. It's not theoretical. They're actually wiping out Muslims and actually taking their land. But words that are used, and Netanyahu literally said from the river to the sea, we're gonna have all of it, right? But the mainstream media in America never once asked anyone, did you use that word? Do you condemn those words? Because being genocidal in favor of Israel, perfectly acceptable. But like thinking that Palestinians might be human, oh, how dare you? So they're all gonna smear you. And notice, it's not just Republicans, it's mainly Democrats that are smearing.
I want to go to the photo of Mamdani and his wife to show you just how extremist they are. These are the extremists that, corporate Democrats, Republicans are trying to fearmonger about. Extremists usually don't have wives who dress as modern as his wife does in that photo. Obviously, he is not an extremist at all, but there's an effort to paint him as an extremist because he has been critical of Israel's genocide in Gaza, and more importantly, because of his economic policies. Make no mistake about it, the reason why corporate media is doing a terrible job in covering him and essentially allowing, smear merchants like Eric Adams to run their mouths is because they hate the economic policies that Mamdani champions. That's what this is really about. And I want to talk a little more about Islamophobia, and in fact, call out someone that I have the displeasure of hosting a show with. Her name's Lindy Li. So I want to go to that video next, because on her take last Friday, here's what she had to say about Mamdani. Let's take a look.
I am absolutely stunned that the city that is famous for being terrorized by Islamic terrorists is on the cusp of electing Islamic extremists who is chanting Globalize Intifada as its mayor. That for me is just jaw-dropping. This is 24 years after 9/11.
I'm just curious, is there a day you wake up where you don't see terrorism everywhere? Because you literally just implied that this guy's a terrorist, and I found that bigoted, Islamophobic, and absolutely disgusting. If you don't like his policies, I can understand that, and we can have a discussion about those policies. But it seems like you just have a problem with the fact that he's Muslim. You have a problem with the fact that he looks a little different from other previous leaders. Don't interrupt me, I'm still speaking, I didn't interrupt you. Listen, the problem with that mayoral race is that the Democratic candidates who ran against him in the primary offered nothing. They offered nothing but the status quo. By the way, the progressive who ran in the primary has decided to endorse Mamdani and happens to be a Jewish American. So these allegations that Mamdani is like some Muslim extremist who hates Jews is utterly ridiculous. And by the way, Cenk, I noticed that Lindy Li changed her tone a little bit when it comes to Mamdani when you were debating her on Piers Morgan's show today. Let's take a quick look at that.
Cenk, I just want to say my opposition to him has nothing at all to do with Israel or his faith. It's nothing. It's to do with his Marxist ideology. And I have to say, I feel sick to my stomach because of it. I was born in an authoritarian communist regime that murdered my great-grandfather in cold blood. So anything that reeks of communism just sends shivers down my spine.
I have yet to host any show with Lindy Li where she doesn't bring up her personal experiences and what happened to her grandparents at the hands of the Chinese Communist Party. But nonetheless, she's ignorant, she's Islamophobic, and I find her embarrassing. Cenk, back to you.
Okay, so when I was on Piers, she also then went back to, mentioning his Muslim background. Rudy Giuliani was vicious about his Muslim background. And they just keep saying things that aren't true, that he said globalize the Intifada or that he supports Hamas. They're just smearing him because he's Muslim, period. You have issues with his economic policies, that's totally worthy of a debate. There's no problem with that at all. Okay, stick to economics. Let's have a real discussion and a debate about whether we should do, government-run grocery stores or rent control, etc. That's the most legitimate thing in the world. Just going after him, and the thing that bothers me, and by the way, I tore into Rudy after he said all those anti-Muslim things. And he came back, he was the one-on-one guest. He came back for the panel just to say like, what happened? I thought we were friends. I'm like, no, brother, wrong again, Bob. No, if we agree on an issue, great. When we disagree on an issue, I'm gonna take your head off, okay? And so that's how it works. This you don't get to say those terrible things and get away with it, 100%. Right? And so they can't help themselves. And the great irony, guys, is that they're like, we're so worried about bigotry against Jews. So under the guise of anti-Semitism, fighting anti-Semitism, they're like, that's why we have to be bigoted towards Muslims. Like what? Okay, insane. No, you don't. You don't have to assume that every Muslim agrees with 9/11 or wants the Statue of Liberty to wear a burqa or is gonna pass Sharia law in Manhattan. Okay, that's insanity. He's just a normal person that happens to be Muslim and socialist, which is a different thing. Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.